UK cinema history, The Dead of Night, with Daniel Kieckhefer.
Man would die, but baby, it's not fine. Politely standing up in a queue. I'm gonna start over. Welcome to UK Cinema History. I'm Eric. I'm waiting for Yazzie, and our first guest is here. Excellent. Hello, Blessed. We're running a little late today. I'm waiting on Yazzie and our special guest, Daniel Kieckhefer, or Kieckhefer, sorry, because Yazzie is running late and Daniel doesn't have notifications, so he's just gonna check back periodically, and we'll see when he gets here. But for now, we are going to do this show. So here we go. All right. So today's film is Dead of Night from 1945, and quick scheduling note: next week for All Saints Day, we will be doing the 1964 film Becket, starring Richard Burton as the Archbishop Becket and Peter O'Toole as King Henry II, and we will be comparing and contrasting it to the 1966 film A Man for All Seasons, starring Paul Schofield as Thomas More, and featuring Robert Shaw as King Henry VIII. So yeah, that's our All Saints Day special next week will be Becket versus A Man for All Seasons. And hello, Daniel. Good to see you. Sorry about Yazzie. I just decided that I wasn't going to wait. If worse comes to worse and she can't make it, will reschedule the room, because I have tried to do rooms without her and they are horrible. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. I hope I can make up some of the difference. If you want, I can wait until Yazzie comes before we say anything significant. I don't know whether we should get started or not.
Well, nah, you know. Honestly, we always take the first 10 minutes to let people kind of find the room anyway.
That's right.
So yeah, we might as well just do some idle chit chat. So what have anything that you've read, seen, heard, drank, tasted that you'd like to talk about? I mean, is there a podcast? Is it, it doesn't have to be film related. Just anything that you've run across that you would like to share.
Oh, what can I say? Well, my family just moved to the Washington, D.C. area a couple months ago, and we're discovering the city's really good for Halloween decorations. Finding a lot of houses festooned with ghosts and
Very
witches
nice
and
there, yeah.
skeletons. Yeah.
I lived in Fredericksburg, Virginia, up until about a year ago, and actually
Oh,
my
really?
kids are still in there. So I was in that area. Yeah,
Where are you
I
now?
worked in Woodbridge actually. So yeah, I was in the burbs
Yeah. Where are
there.
you now?
I'm southern Georgia, there on the border of Florida and Georgia. It's a town called Valdosta. Oh, I got to move around. I got a
Well,
bad signal.
okay.
I got to move. I got a bad signal.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. I keep forgetting. My backyard has black spots. I'm in Valdosta. It's way in the south of Georgia, just on the Florida border. As a matter of fact, The next town over is St. Petersburg.
We spent one night there back in July on the way up here
Oh,
because we were down in Florida visiting some of my family there in the Sarasota area.
oh, okay. Yeah, not much here, you know. Uh, I hope you got one of the
Yeah.
two nice hotels.
It is the Red Roof Inn.
But, yeah. So, oh well, all red roofs are the same. Yeah. Yeah. So how you've been in DC for 2 months
Yeah,
now, huh?
that's right.
Yeah. Gosh, you know that's a city you can't wear out. There's just always something there that you haven't done yet. You know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've tried.
it's a bit like New York City that way. I when I was growing up in Michigan, I used to go to Chicago all the time, and Chicago is a town where I ran out of things to do there. You know, but you can't do that in DC. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Chicago. I spent most of my life there, and
Well, then you know what
I
I'm talking about, and what a horrible place it is. No, I'm joking. I loved Chicago. It was my favorite place to go when I was growing up. But then I moved out back east, and I was like, now this is a city, you know.
yeah, yeah, I kind of know what you mean. It has a lot going for it, but I've decided that I don't want to live there again unless I get a really good job that compels me to.
Well, and you've got children that are still in school, and the school systems are so much better out here
I
than
think
they
so.
are there, unfortunately,
Yeah.
which is tragic, but it's just the way. Oh, I'm going to give you an admin just in case something screws up. At least one of us will still be alive here. Hang on a
True.
moment. Or moderator. I'm sorry. I'm mixing my terms. I was thinking I was on X again.
Oh yeah. Have you ever been on the Twitter Spaces? I've never tried
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Oh, we were talking about that yesterday. Yeah. I don't like them as much.
I mean, I've
Um,
I've quit Twitter since
yeah, you
I
said
mean,
that. You said that. I wish I could. I've got such a large following there that I picked up back when I was a writer, and I'm just afraid none of those people will be able to find me ever again if I leave. You know?
yeah. Hey, here's Luca who's joined us. Let me invite him to speak.
Yeah, I suppose. But yeah, I always wonder because at my height I had about 20,000 followers, but I was writing for like Alan Combs and other places all the time. I don't know. I've got like 11,000 people who still follow me now. I have no idea why. But it's
So it's gone down a lot.
oh, Luca is here. Hi, Luca. I invite everybody to speak, but it's not required. It's just so that I don't accidentally skip anybody over.
Yeah. Do you two know each other?
I know her through, or him. Sorry, him. Gosh darn it, I know him through Scylla. We were in a room about one of the Pedro Almodovar films, and I found him to be very, very knowledgeable about all things Spanish. You actually were in Spain for a long time, weren't you, Luca?
Hi, Eric. Hi, Daniel. It's been a while since I've heard you. It's nice to.
I missed you.
I missed you too. Oh, yeah. Um, so it's nice. I have not seen this film, but I thought I would come, especially since Daniel was here and listen in. But yeah, Almodovar, I'm a big fan of his earlier stuff, and I was living in Madrid and um, in kind of peripherally in the film, in the film world, and it was a very exciting time. So I'm a fan of what was going on over there. And that was a fun room. We had a fun room there, Daniel, with Scylla and Eric about I think it was Talk to Her was the film, and it was it was
I
a very
believe it was
slow.
either that one or The Skin That I Live In. Hopefully not The Skin That I Live In.
No, it was Talk to Her,
Oh, okay. The
and
Skin That I Live In room was the very first time I had ever used the word vagioplasty in my entire life. And it's not luckily become quite a part of my regular vocabulary, thank goodness. But that's the joys of Almodovar, isn't it? You learn things whether you want to or not.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry
I
I missed
just
it, but
it
I'm
was a
sorry I
nice
missed
one.
those rooms. I didn't have time to prepare, and
It was
I'm not
kind of a
disappointed with it.
grueling task, but they were such great movies. But yeah, I think we did 6 total movies, and so it was every single night I was watching a
Well,
different Almodovar film.
yeah.
But that's
I
homework
did
for
join
you.
this Bergman series. Yeah. I joined Sela's Bergman series back in June, I think. June and July. And yeah, that is
That
good too,
was
but
good.
like
Hmm.
one after another, one each day. And it can be grueling. Yeah.
Well, luckily, you see, my children are all grown, so I have no life, so I can indulge in such things, you know. Um, Yazzie and I are actually going to do a room after we've both seen the new Scorsese movie, the Flower of the Desert, or Flower of the you know the one.
Yeah, I keep hearing about it.
uh, yeah, we're
Killing.
gonna do we're gonna do a room on that eventually, but of course that you know I can't even get her to show up for this. No, I'm kidding. She had a crisis come up, so we may end up starting without her, which is fine. She can hear it on replay if she wants to, you know. So I think I'm gonna start without her. So we're gonna start with this being Dead of Night, 1945. So this would be right after the end of the war. Now, Daniel was here, Luca was not, for our History of Ealing Studios. So I'm going to do a just kind of quick bringing us up to date about where Ealing Studios was to get to this place. Then I'm going to kind of turn it over to Daniel for his observations, because he's very keen in terms of picking up themes and things like that, which is kind of a weakness of mine, so, which is why I invited him for this specific film. And then we're going to kind of go through, because this is a portmanteau film, we're going to go through each of the sections of the film and poke fun at at what we don't like, and praise what we do like. So that sounds like a pretty good plan. So I actually made notes for this, so uh, which is, darn it, you know, Yazzie would have been proud of me. Oh well. So we covered the history of Ealing Studios back in episode 2, when 1902 photo enthusiast Will Barker bought the White Lodge at Ealing Green. There he began to produce a short series of silent films that took Blighty by storm, with hundreds of Edwardian Englanders politely queuing up to view 5 minutes of everything from Pratt Falls to the crowning of Queen Victoria. But by the 1920s, the twin ravages of World War I and the emerging American competition had driven the small studios like Ealing into bankruptcy, and it was acquired by impresario Basil Dean, who renamed it Associated Talking Pictures. But Dean left in 1938, and Michael Balkin came over from MGM to run the show. And Michael Balkin changed Ealing forever, first by producing a series of World War II documentaries and bringing over people like Brazilian Alberto Cavalcanti, the director of 2 of the segments of today's film, in order to create them, and also by creating a series of light musicals and comedies with people like Gracie Fields, George Formby, Stan Holloway, and Will Hay. After 1945, Ealing really reached its apex with films like Hue and Cry and Whiskey Galore, Passport to Pimlico, Kind Hearts and Coronets, The Lavender Hill Mob, The Man in the White Suit, Titfield Thunderbolt, and The Lady Killers in 1955, and ending in 1956 with Barnacle Bill. These were all extremely light comedies with good social themes that meant a lot to post-war England at the time, and you will see a lot of that humor in the film we're going to discuss today, which took place before that and was the very first post-war horror film, because England had banned horror films being made during World War II, and that gives us the background for the studio that created this film. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, who is going to talk about what the film means, and then we're going to go through the 5 sections of the film.
Well, okay, we'll start with a little bit of trivia. The star, or the lead actor, Mervyn Johns, plays the architect Walter Craig in the framing story. And you might know that he's the father of the great actress Glynis Johns, who just turned 100 years old about 2 weeks ago. Getting into the movie, there's a nice little twist at the end of Dead of Night, and you might be thinking that that you might think you know what I mean about the little twist. I won't give that away for Luca because there's no point in revealing it here. But there's another twist. Eric, do you happen to remember the name when he tells his wife the name of the farm he's going to? Not the farm. It's called the farm. It's the name of the manor he's going to.
I do not.
It's Pilgrim's Farm. He says he's driving to Pilgrim's Farm to for an assignment.
Oh, it's a Pilgrim's Progress, I guess.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's another reference. Because where is the manor located? That's also revealed.
I don't remember. Was it Essex?
No, it's in Kent. Now put that
Pilgrims
together.
of Canterbury. Ah,
Now you look at
very good.
now you look at the movie. It's a collection um, of nice little charming stories, each with its own little twist. It's a modern version of Geoffrey Chaucer. It's meant to be that, and as such, it's I think meant to remind the British of their heritage, um, to pull the nation together at what is a very critical time. Remember, the war has just ended, and it's hard to imagine. Of course, you look back at Dead of Night today from an American perspective or wherever, and you think it's a Twilight Zone type horror story, and leave it at that, right? But if you place yourself in 1945, the autumn of 1945 in Britain, it's hard to imagine that you're not going to address the war um, in one way or another. Indirectly, of course, but the fact that the nation has just endured 5 or 6 years of torment is not something you can escape. It's there. It's the elephant in the room, and of course, the movie is going to be a response to that one way or another. You said that horror films are banned during the war, and you would also think that there would be. You might think that after the war, a horror story would be a little bit unpalatable to the British, because who wants to be reminded of all the horrors that they've just gone through? Why not? Why not have something more uplifting, more pleasant? Well, as it turns out, Dead of Night was very successful at the box office, so there must be something about it that did resonate with the British in spite of the horror. And looking at each segment, and I'll go through them one by one. Each one of them has something therapeutic. I think it addresses a particular trauma of the times, a particular trauma of that comes out of the war, and reassures people that things aren't as bad as they could be. The following year, the British made a mystery film called Green for Danger, which is also meant, I think, as therapy for the post-war period. It thrusts the British. It reminds people of the difficulties they experienced, but it also reminds them that things aren't all that bad. That they got through it. and they got through it with a certain amount of grace. So, beginning with the first episode, The Hearse Driver, it's a story about a man who has just escaped death in a race car, and he's in the hospital, and he sees he looks out the window in the middle of the night, and there's a hearse parked outside the hospital. The driver looks up at the window into his eye and says, room for just one inside, sir. I might have the quote slightly wrong, but only room for one inside.
Room for just one more, sir.
That's right, room for just one more, sir. And I'm not going to be able to imitate Miles Mallison's accent. He's a priceless character actor.
In about
He appears
25 different Ealing films. He always plays either the drunken constable or the down on his luck fellow who finds fortune. That was his thing. So this was a departure.
Yeah, he's especially memorable in Kind Hearts and Coronets. He's also in the 39 Steps, Hitchcock. Anyway, the point of The Hearse Driver, this man has just had a close brush with death, and he's escaped it. And because of this warning that he's received, the hearse driver, he escapes death a second time in a very chilling twist at the end of the story, which I will leave out for Luca's sake, because Luca, you should see this movie. It's thoroughly enjoyable.
I'm of the opposite opinion. I don't care about spoilers because all of these were done as like Twilight Zone episodes and things like that at one point. Number one, and number two, I think this is a good enough film that you can watch it knowing what the supposed twists are, and I don't think it's dependent on the film on the twists. So, spoil away as far as I'm. And Yazzie, you agree with me? By the way, welcome, Yazzie.
Hi, Yazzie.
Okay, well, we'll wait for her microphone to warm up, but yeah. So I don't worry about spoilers. It doesn't seem to me like it's going to be a big deal. The other thing is, this is a history, UK cinema history, not UK cinema plot summary. So we don't have to really worry about spoilers, I don't think.
Well, yes, and I was of course I can't avoid spoilers entirely in talking about this, and so I'm only calculating that I'm saying just enough to convey the point while leaving a keyhole for surprise.
Well, I'm going to spoil it.
Spoilers, that doesn't upset me. So go right ahead.
Okay.
There's no worries.
Okay. Anyway, so he's had two brushes with death, just like so many soldiers and civilians who had experienced brushes with death in World War II. And the story is reassuring because the man comes out of it fine. He gets married to the nurse that he's been flirting with. It's as if he's been protected by fate. And
I'm going to interrupt real quick, Daniel.
Uh-huh.
When you say he got married to Joyce, is the name of the nurse, right?
Yeah.
That was a kind of an all white people look alike to me moment when I was on like the third viewing of this film before I realized that Joyce was the nurse and that he'd married her. When Joyce shows up later as the woman who needs cab money, and there's just a throwaway line, "Oh, hi, Joyce," and I was like, "Oh, she's from the story." Okay, so sorry about that. It was a moment of revelation, but yeah, because at a certain point, the characters kind of blurred together for me, and I didn't realize that was her.
Yeah, I'm not sure I realized it the first couple of times I watched it, and your story just is a testament to the subtlety of these films. That you can get something out of it the fourth, fifth time you watch it. I think I've seen Dead of Night 12 times by now, so I hope I picked up all the little things.
That's even more than me.
Yeah. It's been a favorite of mine since 1992 when I first watched it. The second episode, The Christmas Party, is a little bit similar. It's not a brush with death, but it's a close encounter with the dead. The girl goes upstairs and she gives comfort to a little boy up there whom she discovers is a ghost. That the boy Francis is the spirit of a boy who was murdered upstairs in the house some time ago, and that sends a chill through her spine. And then she resumes the Christmas party. So the story is meant to reassure people who might have experienced the shock of a neighbor or a comrade at arms dying during the war, and it reminds people that life goes on. That it's Christmas. That there's no need to cease enjoying life just because you've had a close encounter with someone else who died.
And this was based on a real murder case.
Right.
1878, I think, where a girl cut her brother's head off with using
Yeah.
her dad's knife. Yeah.
I mean, there's no
And
shortage of murder cases in England to draw inspiration from, or to model a
but the
story.
names and the house and all of that were actually taken from the actual murder case.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now, question for you: is that a ghost, or did she travel back in time?
Does it matter? She has she the 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 frisson of the experience is a result of just knowing that that boy is a murder victim, that she's just talked to him as if he were alive. So
I have my
yeah,
own opinions. We'll get into when a little bit later, but yeah, and it's
yeah,
something I ask everybody when we're discussing this film. So
yeah. It's an interesting
it's
question.
part
I
of
mean,
it's part of the fun of this film, I think, and I think it's something
yeah.
that they do deliberately, especially for the questions about the last two segments.
Well, this actually goes straight to my thinking about film, which is that uh, film works best when it's ambiguous. It's great that you can interpret it differently, that you can see her as going back in time as opposed to meeting a ghost. But it comes around at the same point in the end, which is that she's just had this chilling uh, encounter with the dead, and it it would have been relatable to somebody who had just gone through a war and had that with neighbors and fellow soldiers. So on a therapeutic level, it works the same either way. As a story, it might be different depending on which path you take. Getting to the third episode. The third episode is The Haunted Mirror, and it's about a man who he and his fiancée um, buy a large ornate wall mirror with a tripartite frame, and he begins to see an antique room across the mirror. He sees himself in it, staring back at him, but he's dressed differently in the mirror. He's the room is different, and uh, this of course creeps him out, as it would creep out anybody. But nobody else can see the old room or the different clothes. Everybody else looks in the mirror and sees the reflection of the room they're in. So makes it even more chilling. But the fact that the room across the mirror is antique is significant because, like so many people in Britain after the war, he's being haunted by the past. And the story tells us that in the end, the horrors of the past might obsess us for a while, but their pull on us is limited. The spell can be broken easily, as it is at the end of the story, and then life goes on. So again, it's a therapeutic story, and it addresses um, a different trauma than the other two. The fourth story, the golfer's story, is the comic interlude in Dead of Night, but there's still a horror element to it. Um, it's about two uh, golfers played by Basil Redford and Naughton Wayne, who were a comic duo that recurred in several films, including they played Charters and Caldecott in several movies, including The Lady Vanishes. Thereby, there's a significant overlap between the casts of Lady Vanishes and Dead of Night. Also, Googie Withers and Michael Redgrave in both movies. So at least four actors are in both films.
Googie Withers plays the wife in the Mirror episode.
That's right.
Joan.
Yes. Also a great actress.
Yeah, especially if you like the Powell, the Michael Powell, Emmett Pressburger films, like One of Our Aircraft is Missing, and Colonel Blimp, and those. Which is what I remember. You know, you talk about being haunted by the past. Every time I see Googie Withers, all I see is just wonderful, wonderful memories.
Yeah. I should see that again. So the golfer's story is about an unlucky golfer whose partner cheats. They'd made a bet that whoever wins the golf game would get the woman, and his partner cheats, steals the woman, and uh, and he he dies, leaving the other golfer to enjoy life. But he comes back as a ghost and haunts his friend, um, and makes things difficult for him. And then there's a twist at the end when he the the ghost remains, keeps the woman, and the other one disappears. So the story would have addressed the trauma of anybody whose sweetheart had cheated on him while he was away at war. And this is a common thing that the fiancés or girlfriends or wives, whatever, on the home front would be alone for years at a time and would find another man. And the soldier would come home and find out about it. And this story can't heal a situation like that, but it can reframe things a little bit and remind uh, whoever's gone through that he's the better man. That the humor would have dampened some of the anger around the subject, and it would have been uplifting to anybody who had gone through that.
Well, and it's also a
Good.
nice break from the horror that's going on in the stories previous to it. So it serves the same kind of purpose for the audience as well,
Right.
and it's deliberately told as a way of kind of cheering up the Craig character because he's about to leave. You know, when they cut back to the mansion, they are all the manor. They are all laughing.
Good point. Good
Uh,
point. And you know the British spirit. They don't want to take things too seriously. They'll always interject some humor. And
and we'll get into it, but the wry sense of British humor, you know, for instance, he's more than willing to give up his wife, but when he's told he has to give up golf, he's like, no, absolutely not. You know, she'll live, but I don't know.
yes,
I can't give up golf.
the British and their obsessions, right? Yeah. So the fifth story is the one that everybody seems to remember best, the ventriloquist's dummy, and I guess it's the most famous of the 5 episodes. And there are two things going on here. One of them, the therapy that fits with the others. The ventriloquist has a split personality of sorts. That he's invested the dummy with so much personality that he really feels um, that his dummy is another person. It's his friend or like a brother. In fact, his name is Maxwell Frere, like Frere is brother in French. But the split personality is something that anybody who's fought a war would probably um, feel that he's split between a normal self and the kind of dark side that shot firearms at other people in a war, and it experienced all kinds of horrors. So the film addresses that. At the same time, there's a nice little allegory going on here, because the ventriloquists, there are two ventriloquists here. They're rivals against each other, and one of them is British, Michael Redgrave's character, and the other one, Sylvester Key, he's American, and the American will win in the end. Just as the United States had, after the war, would across, not just after the war but during the war, supplants Britain as the world's leading power. So Britain, the British Empire, had for a long time been the top dog in the
That's
world.
it, Daniel. I'm putting you in the audience. How dare you? Land of hope and glory, men that made us mighty.
Oh, I knew you were an Anglophile, but you are American, aren't you? But the key thing here is that the rivalry plays out in Paris, just as it was playing out in France during the war, where the British and Americans were fighting side by side. The two ventriloquists are at Beulah's nightclub in Paris, and Beulah is also American. Beulah is Eisenhower, the supreme command, right? Because it was the Americans who took control of D-Day and the European campaign in World War II. So um, there's still a little bit of comedy in this episode that would have taken some of the sting, I think, out of the loss of pride that Britain is no longer the supreme force in the world. It's just a nice little bit of allegory. So effectively, Dead of Night is meant, I think, as it's a kind of therapy for the British, and it's fascinating. Just as psychoanalysis um, looks both forward and backward in time, psychoanalysis digs into the past while looking forward to a better future. There's a lot of play with time in Dead of Night. In fact, there's a kind of pattern, because the first and last segments, the hearse driver and the ventriloquist dummy, are more or less modern in their setting. One's a hospital and then one's a nightclub, right? Whereas the second and fourth episodes, the Christmas party and the golfing story, are antique in their settings. The golfing story might look modern enough. I mean, golf is a modern sport, but it's an 18th century clubhouse, and it reflects a very traditional um, way of life. This is upper class England, right? The second story, the Christmas party, is set in an old English mansion. It was haunted, after all. So the second and fourth segments are antique. The first and last are modern. So what about the middle? Well, the middle is the modern facing the antique. It's split by the mirror, and you have both looking at each other. So there's a very beautiful symmetry in the movie where um, it's like a five-piece um, uh, pentateuch with with alternating um, modernity and tradition. One other thing about I guess the recurring ideas in Dead of Night. Everything that I said leaves out the fact that during World War II, uh, the British had always been kind of jammed together, forced together in uncomfortable ways. Whether you're a soldier in a trench or a civilian hiding in the subways during bombing raids, or sharing living space, or sharing even sharing rationed food. People were forced together by the war. it's already a crowded enough country, but during the war, people were even more crowded. They would sometimes have to leave their homes, go out into the countryside to stay safe, or your neighbors have been bombed out of their home and you have to bring them in and live together. And of course, there are all these. London, for example, was constantly under bombing attacks, and people would go into the subways and spend the night there with strangers. So the wartime was largely a time of togetherness, strangely enough. Maybe uncomfortable togetherness, but still togetherness. And each of the stories in Dead of Night reminds people, in one way or another, that even in peacetime they would have to continue to stick together. For example, the hearse driver reminds us that whether he's in a race car or an overcrowded bus, the idea of just room for one inside, sir, is a harbinger of death. That if you're alone, you're in danger, right? To be, of course, in the overcrowded bus, he's not going to be alone, but the words "just room for one inside" um, resonate in a way that reminds you that there's room for one. That's death. In a coffin. There's room for one inside, right?
When they remade this for the Twilight Zone, they changed it to an elevator.
Okay, yeah, right. Same idea. That's it. That could actually work very well. I suppose the elevator crashes, right? The
Yeah,
elevator plummets to its.
it's exactly the same plot. It's
How,
just an elevator instead of a bus. Which
right. How did I guess?
I look at the bus as being a pretty good metaphor when you're in England, because you think, what is safer than a bus? And so when
Right.
the bus, whereas elevators in horror movies, you or in that case a TV show, you kind of automatically are suspicious of them, because while in real life they're quite safe, in movies, they're always crashing.
Yes. So the next one, the Christmas party. Sally has her brush with the ghost exactly because she's avoiding the crowd. Right? There's a crowd of people downstairs, and she's trying to get away from them, and that's what ends up spooking her out, traumatizing her. So comfort is with other people. She belongs downstairs with the party.
And the game they are playing is called Sardines, where everybody packs in together.
Oh my
It's a
gosh.
version of hide and seek, where they all have to pack in when they find somebody, and all pack in like sardines, which is a game that was actually, it is a real legitimate game in England, and was invented during World War II to play during bombings,
How did
where
I miss that? That absolutely
people,
reinforces my point.
yeah,
Yeah.
because during the bombing raids in the bomb shelters, it was a game that the children had invented, where they would find different areas of the bomb shelter and to hide, and they would find each other, and they would all pack into that area of the bomb shelter. So there you go.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Okay, this makes everything worth it. I mean, that clinches my point in a way. But yeah, just to go on. The next story, the haunted mirror. It might not be so obvious that this is about togetherness, but it's about a man who's secretly afraid of marriage, and he comes to accept it in the end. So again, it's about the necessity of togetherness, although on the more intimate scale of a family. The golfing story is about two men who can't make room for a woman between them. So, in its own way, it's about fitting people together. And the ventriloquist's dummy is about a man who's his madness. He's possessive of his dummy. So, um, I don't know. This might not connect as neatly as the others to the idea of togetherness, but
And it is important to point out that the golfing story and the Christmas story were cut out of the American versions, as being too British, and so they weren't restored until the 1960s. So if you were watching this in America, that ending made absolutely no sense because you're like, who are these kids? And
Right.
but they said 101 minutes or whatever was too long, and so they cut those sections out.
Yeah, and then you lose the whole symmetry of the movie. So
Did you
yeah,
say, Daniel? Did you say, Daniel, that you couldn't see how the story about the dummies fit into the theme of togetherness? Is that what you said?
I'm just saying it's less obvious than the others, but
Well, I'll get to that when I get to my rundown, Luca. But the dummy story is actually told by the psychiatrist,
Oh, I
and
like it
he
already.
is the skeptic of the group. The rest of them all believe in spiritual or supernatural phenomenon. He's the skeptic of the group, and so he's attempting to give logical explanations for everything. So it is meant to differ in theme from the rest because of the narrator.
Well, I just on, and I have not seen the movie, but just on first blush, I would imagine the ventriloquist had a degree of social awkwardness.
He's played by
He
Michael
didn't.
Redgrave, so yes, he's playing him as a suppressed homosexual, as he plays every role in every film from Lady Vanishing on.
Okay, so you have.
Definitely playing the ventriloquist as a suppressed homosexual. But
So
that was his thing. That Robert De Niro always plays Robert De Niro, and Michael Redgrave always played Michael Redgrave.
so yeah, I mean, just building up from that, one would imagine that this was a person who was likely to be very socially isolated and alone, except that they created a dummy, which was the one way they could find companionship and togetherness, conversation and connection. Although,
good point.
however
Good point.
perverse it may be,
Well,
it's
and
Yeah,
it's
the fact that this is the psychiatrist's story,
yeah.
and he is a Freudian psychiatrist, then the dummy in that case becomes your id, because your id is both your social consciousness, right, and also your uh, burning desire to, for lack of a better term, be a jerk, and you get both.
isn't the superego the social consciousness?
No,
The
sorry,
the the, the id is
superego
the
is
primitive.
how other people perceive you. Id is, is your consciousness of how you are perceived.
Your consciousness of
Well,
how I thought the id was a primitive kernel, the lizard brain inside.
Yeah, that's the other part, the obnoxious part.
yeah. So the
I don't see how that's social consciousness, but Luca, you're the expert on this.
well, yeah. So the id is the repository of all the drives, the desires, the hidden urges, the animal driving forces. The ego is the ideal, the moral perfection towards which I strive. And the ego is the public facing self and a kind of a compromise between the id and the superego. So the ego is kind of between the two, and it's what we present to the world. It's, I want to be very greedy from my id. I am taught to be magnanimous and beneficent, and I'll kind of land somewhere in between those two, and that's the ego.
Okay, yeah, I'd have to think about how this maps.
That was so much better. That was so much of a better explanation than mine, Luca. Thank you.
No, but just the point about the dummy is I don't think necessarily you have to leave that out of the togetherness theme because it's, and again, told by a psychiatrist, so there's probably the psychopathological example of the yearn for connection and partnership is, well, you create a dummy and
Well,
then
we're going to
have.
get into spoilers, so I might as well spoil it. They unify into one person. The dummy actually takes control of the Michael Redgrave destroys the dummy, and um, you've seen Psycho, I'm sure, Luca, and you know how at the end of Psycho, Norman is turned into his mother. Well, at the end of this, Michael Redgrave is turned into the dummy. He turns his head. He does a perfect dummy face, and the dummy's voice comes out of his mouth. So they unify into one person.
Right. Both of them are
Yeah,
split
there's a lot.
personality that are taken over by the stronger half. Yeah.
So yeah, sorry to
Psycho.
interrupt your flow, Daniel. You were kind of finishing up the theme of
Oh,
Don't be sorry. That actually helped.
Daniel's used to it. That's life here at UK Cinema History. Yeah.
And also in understanding movies, in our other group, I mean, I want to have a dialogue. I don't want to do a monologue. This is and Luca, that's very helpful actually. That kind of finishes my point in a way that I was missing. Thank you for that. You're right. I mean, the fact that the personalities merge just tells you all the more how much he needs togetherness, how much he needs to have a partner. He needs to have somebody, um, kind of intimacy.
yeah. There was I think it was Eric Erickson who said there is there is always and ever the dyad. That we are always in dyadic relationship, in a one-on-one relationship, even to ourself, even
Right.
when we are isolated. We talk to ourselves, we create another, we write a diary and we write to Kitty in the diary in Anne Frank. We have a soccer ball that we call Wilson in Castaway. We need the other and we create it always and ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Very important. By the way, I don't want to leave out the framing story because there's something uh, important here. I talk about togetherness. The framing story. Do you remember, Eric, where the framing story climaxes?
Are you talking about the actual framing story, or the dream ending part of the
The actual framing story in the night.
in the den? When he goes to strangle the psychiatrist.
Right. And what's the occasion that brings them together? That brings the architect and the psychiatrist together.
Oh, he breaks his glasses.
And why does he break his glasses?
Somebody's getting him a schnapps.
But the lights go out, right?
Oh yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, somebody you'd never heard of dying was predicted,
Right.
and they had named the the electrical generator George, and yes, that's
That's
correct.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. The lights go
So
out.
the,
And lights going out would have reminded British in 1945 of all the blackouts during the
of
war, right?
course, yeah.
That's fucking brilliant.
And and the blackouts were occasions for social bonding because people would huddle together in a blackout, light a candle, and gather around the candle, whatever. Um, except there's a perversion here that instead of bonding together as they should, Mr. Craig sends everybody out of the room so that he can be alone with Van Straten and murder him. So he's rejecting togetherness. He's using the blackout as an occasion to get rid of everybody. So,
Wait, I missed
but
that. Can you say it again?
yeah, um, the architect, the central character of Dead of Night, when he's come to the point now where he wishes to murder the psychiatrist, and when the blackout occurs, he sends everybody out of the room. He tells everybody to leave so he can be alone with the psychiatrist and have the opportunity to kill him. So he's using the blackout as an excuse to be to send everybody away. He's he's perverting the traditional association of blackouts with togetherness. Instead of huddling
Oh,
around
okay.
together, he's everybody get out.
I see it. It's good. It's not as solid, I think, in the film, but yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean you have to make some of the connections yourself, and if you were British in 1945, you would
I'm neither.
probably fit better. Yeah.
Luca's one of those. Scottish.
No, I'm not Scottish. I lived in Ireland, but definitely
I
not British.
never ever can get that straight. Your accent is such a mystery to me. It's probably because you've traveled so much.
I guessed it was Irish when I first heard you, and I think I told you that. And
But it's not even a
but
real
you're
Irish because it was lives in Italy and Guyana, so it's moving around quite a bit.
Touch of Australian in there somehow. Go on, Daniel.
Have you
Sorry,
been to Australia, Luca?
we got off track again. Go ahead.
No. Let me see if there's anything else. Looking through my notes. It's amusing to me that the psychiatrist is so much like Dr. Caligari, with the spectacles, his build,
Ooh, good point.
um,
And the way he's lit.
the way he's lit, yeah, and his ambiguity. He could be either sinister or benign, like Caligari, and the fact that well, his name Van Straten is Dutch, of course, but that's a Germanic name, Germanic without being German, but it would have um, helped people to connect him with Dr. Caligari, possibly. Don't know.
Well, actually, there's a story behind that. Uh, in whatever story that they were basing it on, it was originally Von Straten, and they changed it to Van because of
Oh,
World War II and the Germans. They
right.
thought it would soften it. So there is but it was originally Von. He was originally Von Straten, and
Uh-huh.
they changed it to Van because uh, of the association with the Holocaust in Germany and having just gotten out of the war. It was a very common thing at the time to soften German names in England.
They must have changed the second part of the name too, because Straten is spelled with two
Yes,
A's.
exactly.
Straten,
He
the
was
Dutch, the
originally
Dutch.
Dr. von Straten, and
Uh-huh.
he became von Straten, Dan Straten, in order to because of the association with Germany. Yeah.
Right.
A couple other names were changed, but that was the only one that was important.
Yeah. Oh, and I missed one important point. The culmination of um, this argument about togetherness. The architect has come to this house to build 2 additional rooms, right? So his task
Interesting.
is to make room for more people, so that more people can live together. And at the
That is
end, I mean,
interesting.
when
I
the
hadn't thought
story
of
comes,
that.
yeah, when the story comes full circle at the end, um, it looks like the horror is going to begin again. Oh, and this is important too. The fact that it's cyclical, that we're thrust back into the cycle of the horror. Um, for Again, for people who've just lived through World War II, the World War II itself was like a recurrence of an old cycle. It is World War One. World War One is supposed to be the war to end all wars, right? But no, it happened again, World War II. And you come to the end of World War II, and you're suddenly faced with this idea of it happening a third time. Is this going to be an endless cycle of world wars?
Have
And
you
that's the
seen the
real
DVD? Have you seen the DVD documentary on
no.
this?
If I have, I've forgotten it. I don't remember.
In it, the claim is made that was actually added by accident. That when they were screening the rough cut of the film, the projectionist accidentally put the first reel on,
Oh,
and they were like,
but it works.
"That's freaking brilliant!"
Yeah,
And the whole entire film's a loop. I don't believe
yeah,
it. I have 2 reasons for not believing it. Number one, there's too much else in the film that only makes sense with that ending.
yeah.
And number two, Balkan was famous for claiming that any clever idea in an Ealing film was some lucky accident or something.
Yeah.
But it's the story that they're going with.
Yeah.
Actually, if you get a chance, there's a link on our Clubhouse page to it that Yazzie posted, and it's also on our Facebook page, UK Cinema History over on Facebook, to that to the YouTube version of that documentary. John Landis is interviewed in it, which is the scariest thing in the whole movie, because I'm like, why isn't he in prison? He killed Vic Morrow. But anyway.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to watch that. Yeah, thank you for that.
It's mostly a bunch of long-haired film critics from The Guardian talking about the film in post haste, but it's got a lot of behind-the-scenes stories.
Yeah. Well, I'm on your side. I don't believe that it was accidental, but my
Great
philosophy of
story,
film
though,
is
isn't
the
it?
intentionality. Yeah, the intentionality in the end doesn't matter. What matters is the film that you have in front of you, and that's
Yeah.
what you can interpret.
To make it clear for Luca, so at the end of the film, you have all of the stories coming together, where Craig is put through all of the different stories that were told after he strangles the doctor. So he's getting pushed around by the kids, and he goes to hide, and he tries to hide inside the haunted mirror. Um, he gets found out, and the jailkeeper is actually the hearse driver, and he says, "Just room for one inside," so throws him into a jail cell where the dummy is hitting, and then the dummy comes to life and starts to strangle him. And then he wakes up. His wife takes a phone call and asking him to go out to a country manor for an architecture job. And then you
Williams
see the
Farm.
very first shot of the film, which is him driving up to that manor. And under the credits, you see the beginning of the film again. So the whole film is a loop over and over again. He's just constantly reliving the same nightmare, like Groundhog's Day.
Right.
Which I don't think that's a spoiler, quite honestly. I think it actually enhances the film while you're watching it to know that it's a loop.
Yeah.
And fucking brilliant, as far as I'm concerned, because it's using the exact same shots. You know, it literally is just the opening of the film with the credits rolling. Was that it, Daniel?
So yeah,
And we can move on to
that
my
might be.
notes. Okay,
Yes,
my notes.
that might be.
My
I just
notes.
have before rushing on to your notes, I just had a question, Daniel.
You could ask
What would you
90.
say would be okay? What would you say would be the overall feeling that you had watching the film? Like, was it tension and suspense? Was it enjoyment and droll? Sort of a droll, entertaining film. How would you sort of characterize it as a whole?
Hey, Luca, actually, can you hold off on that question? Because that's going to be a discussion point that I had scripted
Okay.
about it. That is something that Daniel and I are actually going to discuss in detail, because I have a feeling he and I are going to kind of have a disagreement about it, and that's going to be the fun of this room. So yeah, if we could just hold off on that, because it's going to point to something in my notes, because I'm going to give a kind of a different account, a different view of the same material, but I'm not going to summarize the plot the same way, because we don't need two plot summaries.
Okay, I suppose I'll hold off on my answer too.
Yeah, because it's going to come to what I think of the film and where I put it in film history, so to speak.
Okay, just so long as we don't have a blackout and strangle each other, we should be okay.
Not again. All right, let me pull up my let me pull up my notes. I didn't make a lot. I don't actually make notes usually for this room. I did this time just because Daniel was here. Normally it's just Yazzie and I bouncing off of each other, and we've got such a great rapport. We don't need notes, but I did this time, which is lucky because Yazzie's not here to bounce off of. Okay, so. In America, they call this type of a film an anthology, but I shall refer to it as a portmanteau First of all, we love a good Anglo-French hybrid word here at UK Cinema History, and it's just a fun word to say, portmanteau. Portmanteau. So almost makes the Norman invasion worthwhile, god damn it. Harold Godwinson did not take an arrow in the eye at Hastings just so we can use a dull-ass word like anthology when we have a perfectly good word like portmanteau, which almost means the same thing, but not really. But all jokes aside, the reason I want to disassociate Dead of Night from the international trend of anthologies is because those types of films, whether it's your Love at 20 with Francois Truffaut and Roberto Rossellini, intercut with Cartier-Bresson films, or the anthology TV shows like The Twilight Zone or what have you, are not considered their directors or their writers or their actors' best work, whereas I consider this to be an art form all of its own, and it's a very uniquely British art form, one which in the 1960s, Luca, maybe you would watch reruns of these on television, but a studio called Amicus created a series of these types of films, horror portmanteaus. Do you remember any of the Amicus films? Such as Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, Torture Garden, The House of Drip Blood, or, of course, the 1972 Tales from the Crypt. No, you don't. Okay. Well, these were the grandchildren of Dead of Night. And each one would have a framing story. For instance, the Dr. Terror's House of Horrors took place on a train where they're playing cards and telling ghost stories. And they would have very big stars that they could pay very little because, of course, they didn't have to film them for very long. And because they were basically short stories. So you had Peter Cushing, you had Denholm Elliott, you had Donald Sutherland in one of his early roles, and all of them were paid, like £1,000 to come for a couple of days for these portmanteau films, and they're all excellent terror, but they all get their basis from Dead of Night. So unlike, say, a movie like New York Stories, which nobody talks about Francis Ford Coppola or Martin Scorsese or Woody Allen's part in New York Stories as being, one of their great works, or if they discuss it at all, because they were just kind of a one-off. This is for fun. That's an anthology. This is a portmanteau. So if we put it into those roots and we look at how the film is put together, so you had 4 different directors. You had the Brazilian Alberto Cavalcante, who, if you are a student of South American film, basically invented the Brazilian documentary genre. He is still to this day considered the greatest director ever to come out of Brazil. And he was hired by Ealing Studios to make war documentaries. And once the war had ended, he was still on staff and made 6 films for them, including one of their better tearjerkers, It Always Rains on Sunday. And he directed 2 segments of this, The Christmas Story and the most famous one, of course, The Ventriloquist Dummy. But the other directors, Robert Hamer, who directed quite a few of the Ealing comedies, and then the comic section, The Story of the Two Golfers, was directed by one of my favorite directors, Charles Crichton, who would later go on to be nominated for an Oscar 43 years later as the co-scriptwriter and director of A Fish Called Wanda. But when you hear criticism of this film, his section, the one about the two golfers, is considered the weakest of the bunch. and yet it's one of my favorites because of what runs through this film. And this goes back to your question to Daniel about how you felt about this film. This film is filled to the brim with that dry English sense of humor. And so if you were to ask me, the word I would use about my feeling about the film is cozy. It feels like a cozy film. And when the terror starts, for instance, in the mirror, when she's forced to break the mirror to keep her husband from strangling her, it feels all the more shocking because of the coziness of what goes around it. And yet there is just kind of a sense that, well, this is just a ghost story. And so that's how I feel about the film. I think that's something that puts it in the tradition of the Amicus stories, because when Amicus Studios was creating those films, they were competing against these more bloody, gory exploitation type horror films. But what they actually created was this more subtle, humorous look at, oh, wasn't that horrible? Oh, joke, mate. So, and I'll go back to kind of like and I'm just going to read what my notes on the opening are. Now, this isn't actually what happens. This is just kind of how my thought process was during it. So, pulling up my notes here. We begin with a car pulling up to a country manor driven by Walter Craig, played by Mervyn Johns, who most Americans know as Bob Cratchit in the Alistair Sim version of Scrooge. He's greeted by the manor's owner, Elliot Foley, played by Roland Culliver, and we learn that Walter is an architect hired to expand the mansion. As we enter the mansion, we are introduced to the most polite group of people, and I have in parentheses, of course they are polite, they live in a manor. Basically he says, I'm sorry, I appear to be having a bit of a complete mental breakdown, to which the polite manor guests reply, oh, stiff upper lip, old beam, a cup of tea and a few dozen cigarettes, and you'll be right as rain. And so this is the feeling that you get. And then when Mrs. Foley takes him by the arm and introduces him to all the guests, you get a welcoming feeling. You are part of this. You feel like you have become one of the guests. And yet here he is basically having a mental breakdown in front of them. And you can see it in his face. And so you have this coziness with this one isolated figure, and he's lit differently from everyone else in the scene. So everyone else is kind of lit from forward facing, and he's lit from underneath. And of course, when you light someone from underneath, the shadows cast up on him, and these shadows are casting up on his face. And so he is the blot inside this coziness. So then he walks up to the Dr. Van Straten, and he tells him that he has met him before, and he is somebody that he dreams about all the time, and that everyone in this room has been part of his dreams. And Dr. Van Straten says, no, you are merely stuck in a portmanteau film. See, it's even fun to say in German. And all the others believe that Walter Craig, is telling the truth, and that and each one takes a turn telling a supernatural story, trying to convince the doctor that, and he quotes Hamlet here, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And so, and this moves us to the race car driver telling the story known as the hearse. So, to me, what you're setting up here is less the story of the horrors that are going to happen than the comic interludes that are going to keep this cozy so that you will actually enjoy it as a story. So, for instance, the teenage girl's mother Let me look up her name. Sally O'Hara.
Sally.
Yeah, Sally O'Hara. Sally O'Hara's mother comes, and he is told her that he, in his dream, he beats her ceaselessly, and the mother says, "No, you have to leave. You got your uncle's birthday party. Well, it's not really your uncle; it's a family friend, but she calls him uncle." And she's like, "No, I have to stay so I can be beaten senselessly." And the mother says, "Well, he can beat someone else," and then they leave. Great dry British sense of humor. The couple in the mirror episode, constantly going back and forth. Like John Landis compares them to a Noel Coward couple in that documentary that I was talking about. In the race car version, story about just room for one more, sir. You've got the constant flirtation with the nurse, which is always funny in that dry sort of British way. "Oh, I can't recover unless you marry me," and things like that. It is at its heart a very funny film, without being overtly funny, and that in that it's very, very, very British and very, very, very dry. In the more psychological episode involving the mirror, you constantly have this kind of cutting of the scenes with this jealousy that the husband feels for Daniel. Remind me, what is the name of her friend that he ends up getting jealous over? I can't remember.
Okay, I don't remember all the names.
I don't remember either, but but basically she has a friend, and he's constantly being written off as kind of like, oh, the poor guy, what's he going to do when we're married, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're set up by that dry British sense of humor to not forget about him as a character, but not consider it to be a threat, except then when he is possessed by whatever it is, whether it's the spirit of the mirror or whether it's a psychological aversion to Mary. It is his jealousy over her relationship with him that drives him to try to strangle her to death. So again, you are constantly being put into a cozy situation, set up to believe that you are in a dry British comedy, and then the horror comes. And then you are taken back out of it. So to take us back out of it, because the first two stories, the Christmas story and the hearse driver story, were so incredibly short. This is what the trick that the film does. By the third one, which is longer, we need to be taken out of that much more slowly, because you see, you have two short ones so that you don't forget that you're in a portmanteau. You don't forget about the people drinking tea back at the mansion, or back at the manor. But then you are lost in almost half an hour story, and so you're brought back more slowly into the next story, which is the two golfers, which is played almost exclusively for laughs, down to the casting of the two fellas from Lady Vanishes and Night Train to Munich, who constantly were going around looking for cricket scores in the Alfred Hitchcock films. And here, as Daniel says, the theme is part of that unity, because really, taken as characters and drawn as characters, they're both the same person in so many ways. And they even say, we're as good as Bobby Jones. There's nothing to choose between the two of us. And when they decide that they're going to play a golf game, with the winner being able to keep the woman and the loser having to disappear, she has her first line and she says, "Oh, why didn't we think of that before?" Because she can't choose between them, because they are virtually the same person. And what this allows for is a lot of physical comedy between the two. So when he comes back as a ghost and he can't remember the spell, the hand signals that it takes to make him disappear, you are observing one of the one who isn't a ghost talking to an invisible ghost through somebody else's eyes, making these ridiculous hand gestures. At one point, he ducks down, very Chaplin style, behind a desk, and then comes back up. And this is directed by Charles Crichton, who was a great comedy director, which I think. If you would do worse than watch The Lavender Hill Mob if you want some great dry British humor. And actually, I rewatched A Fish Called Wanda, which was a film I had never really cared for, and I was still don't particularly care for it as a laugh out loud comedy. But Charles Crichton's direction is excellent. Interesting note about Crichton is he did not get a lot of work after Ealing Studios because he was too exacting. He required too many takes, and he required everything to be almost perfect. And so he got kind of co-signed onto these BBC sci-fi shows with the idea that you kind of need a perfectionist for sci-fi. But he wasn't able to really get film work because they felt like he was driving up budgets. And as it turns out, the most expensive segment of Dead of Night was the comic golfer segue. But you need that after the horror of the mirror episode to balance yourself, to feel cozy again, because otherwise, and this is, I think, the brilliance of the film, you are going to get too immured and the horror is no longer going to be horrible, because if you're staring at it for 101 minutes, then you are no longer going to feel the shock of it anymore. So instead of using jump scares the way modern horror does, or things like that to keep the audience constantly on edge, going back to what I thought would be a good discussion between Daniel and I about in answer to your question, Luca, is I feel like this is constantly attempting to put you at ease so that when you are meant to be on edge, that on edgeness actually has more of an effect. By the way, hi Herbert, it's good to see you. Okay, he probably can't hear me. Oh, there he is.
Hi.
Hi there.
Have you seen this
Hi,
film?
No, sorry. I didn't get notification on this. I lost how to find the room, I think.
Oh, well, that's fine. Next week we're doing Beckett and versus A Man for All Seasons. So you've got a heads up now, and it'll be the same time next week. So Beckett, 1964, starring Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole, and A Man for All Seasons with Paul Scofield as Thomas More from 1966. Anyway, 2:30 p.m.
2:30 p.m. Okay. So
If
Sunday,
3
okay.
works better, I might change it to 3.
No.
We lost Yazzie today, unfortunately, because something came up. Daniel's my co-host today now. Which it's lucky I had a guest star, or I might have just had to reschedule this whole room, because I sure as heck wouldn't have tried to sit up here by myself doing this. So anyway, back to that question, Daniel. If you could answer Luca's question, and then this, I think, will open a very fruitful conversation about the difference in British cinema versus other countries.
Okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to provide your expected disagreement, because I kind of accord with what you're saying about
Bummer.
the coziness and the humor. If this is going to be a therapeutic film, then of course it wants to put the audience ultimately at ease. As you might know from past rooms, I'm no fan of the idea of film genre. It's not that genre doesn't exist or isn't doesn't have any importance, but that it's reductive, that it reduces films to a single emotion. That a horror film is supposed to scare you, goddammit. That's all. And then
But
a
it is a
suspense film is
convenient
supposed to make you
handle.
tense.
It's a title, it's a gimmick, it's a handle, it's a convenient way to express ideas. So that's why we use it.
Yeah, but it also reduces the level of discussion sometimes when critics try too hard to make a film fit into a genre, and it just becomes a pointless exercise. The Dead of Night is yeah, obviously there's a lot of there are a lot of elements of horror, spookiness, and um, you do get that. You do get a certain chill when Miles Malison says, "Just room for one inside, sir." But um, and other moments, the mirror, the dummy, and so on. All those things are a little bit chilling, but it's it's mixed with other feelings. It's mixed with feelings of tension, um, feelings of comic relief, and so on. So it's not one thing, as it shouldn't be. Most good films are give you a mix of emotions, and this is no exception.
Interesting point you're making. Also, I would say the same for the term a B film. A B film tends to collapse or be reductive of the ways we can experience them.
Well, and there are no B films anymore because we don't do double features any longer. So, it's not just a reductive phrase; it's a worthless one. It was invented because you had a higher budget film as your A film and a lower budget film as your B film. Well, in the era of independent films, the budget doesn't tell you everything. Next week, we're going to be looking at a film, A Man for All Seasons, that was shot for $2 million versus a film that was shot for $11 million, which was the equivalent of almost $75 million in Beckett. And I tell you, of the two, the A film would be A Man for All Seasons, simply because it's the better looking of the two films. So budget really doesn't have anything to do with how good or bad a film is anymore.
So
By the
how
way, A
many
Man for All
times?
Seasons. Just a quick note: A Man for All Seasons is the first movie my parents saw together
Oh,
when they
I
were
love
dating.
them already.
Oh wow.
Well, I hope you're here to tell that story next week.
Oh, let's see. I don't know if I can make it. Um, I just have such a busy schedule now. But
Oh yeah,
let's
I
see.
know. Priorities. Yes,
Yeah.
you people with families and lives. You make me sick.
No,
So
no.
I was
Yeah.
gonna
Believe
ask.
me, it's not.
You mentioned that psychiatrist says to the, I guess it was the architect. He said you're acting, you're inside of your own portmanteau film, which to
I
me
made that
is.
up. That's not actually in the
Oh, you
film.
didn't say that.
He
Okay.
doesn't say that. He says that you are that there's a perfectly logical explanation, and that well, and at one point he said, but at one point he doesn't say you're in a portmanteau film. What he actually says is that this is all an elaborate practical joke at his expense. Is what he actually is saying.
Okay.
I was just having some fun.
Now, that was leading me to wonder if there were winks at the audience or kind of breaking the fourth
Like an
wall.
early meta? No, this is not an early meta.
It was not happening.
No,
Okay.
no. I'm afraid. I'm afraid not. That was just me having a bit of fun. Plus, you gave me another chance to use the word portmanteau. It's just a fun word to say. I can't help it. Although you have to make sure you've got the pop filter on your mic if you say it, because otherwise it'll come out pop. My Phil.
I also see these movies called omnibus films sometimes. I don't know how widespread that is, but I've
Yeah,
seen it.
omnibus is portmanteau and anthology they're all pretty much interchangeable now, but I don't refer to, for instance, what was the film that Fellini and Rossellini did the Terrence Stamp film for, or whatever. I don't think of those in terms of being a portmanteau. Those
Right.
to me are omnibus, because they don't really have a framing device, number one, and number two, the portmanteau is really exclusive to, you're going to hate this word, the genre of horror, or at least of having some sort of a psychological thriller aspect to it.
Yeah. I don't hate the word genre. I just think I wish to deprecate it. But yeah,
That's fair
there
enough.
were a bunch of those films in the 1950s and 60s. The omnibus.
Yeah.
Type.
Oh yeah. And
The Seven Deadly
the
Sins.
the thing that was good about them was that there was always going to be something that you liked in them. The thing that was bad about them was there was always going to be something you didn't like in them. But my favorite film of all time, Luis Buñuel's Simon of the Desert, was made for an omnibus film, where Sylvia Pinell, the star who played the devil in it, had gotten her husband to finance a film with 3 different directors starring her. And the film ended up falling through after Buñuel had already filmed his portion, because the other 2 directors wanted to put their wives in it. And Buñuel was stuck with an hour-long film that he distributed with, I can't remember, it was an Orson Welles short film. But it's my favorite film of all time. I have seen it in the 40s or 50s of times, and find something new in it every single time. And so they can create great pieces, but I don't ever think of one where I'm like, that's a great film. Whereas Dead of Night and the Amicus horror films are great as an entire film to me. And that, I think, is maybe why I'm more passionate about not associating them with the anthology or omnibus, because they are different in that they are good.
That's fair enough. Is Simon of the Desert really your favorite film of all time? Are you
No,
joking
I
or?
would probably say because based on how many times I've seen it and the amount of enjoyment that I get out of it, and yeah, I would put it there.
Well,
You know,
I
I mean,
I also
if you ask me a different day, it might be a different answer, but it's
okay.
gonna be in the 5 or 6 that rotate at that position, I would say.
Okay. I like the film very much too. I've been rewriting the 100 chapters of my book over the past year, and that's it's one of the 19 remaining that I still have to get to. But I will post it on my website, and I'll let you know when I've written
Really? Wow.
Simon of the
How
Desert.
close are you, Daniel? You got 19
Hmm?
remaining.
Oh, let's see. There are a couple of Fassbinders, a couple of Chabrol's. There's a couple of Chaplins. Um, I've got what movie Seconds. Um, let's see. Phone Call from a Stranger. Um, let's see. There's um, what else is left? A couple of Tarkovskys. Did I mention that? Yeah. So yeah, getting close to the end. I've got. It's
And
about early
Tarkovsky
next
is
year.
kind of the opposite of Dead of Night and Ealing. He wants to make you feel as uncomfortable as possible. Uh,
There's not a lot of comic relief in Tarkovsky, but there is actually a little bit, like when the phone rings in Stalker.
well,
It,
and there are parodies of other films in Tarkovsky, which if you're at which I'm not going to say are laugh out loud funny, but are definitely clever send-ups of the directors of the time. And so if you're a film nerd like we are, there's a knowing humor there.
yeah, well, there's for example in Nostalgia, there's a reprise of the nightmare sequence from Wild Strawberries, but
Oh wow.
it's not quite obvious what the humor in it is, if there is any. But
Like
you
I
could
say,
look at it.
it's humor is the wrong phrase, but there's a
Yeah,
knowing cleverness, I guess I would say,
yeah.
like
You
a
you
wink.
could
There's a
look at it
wink.
that way. You could look at it as a kind of um, bemused uh, take on the original.
The man himself
Hmm.
had a great sense of humor. If you ever, hear or see him interviewed or read his autobiography or I mean, he just was one of these people like Mel Brooks who was just funny all the time, and it is kind of interesting how dour his films seem to be. Given what a great sense of humor he has, but he explained it that his films are kind of his way of working out all of that stuff that he doesn't work out in real life, and that it allows him to have such a jovial personality. Like you see Michelangelo Antonioni interviewed, he's exactly who you would think from his films. He maybe has smiled twice in his life, and it probably hurt.
I, I actually do see a little bit of humor in Antonioni too. There are a few little touches
But
of it,
not in
but
his. Yeah, but the only thing that amuses him, he says, is sex. I think it was
Mhm.
Rex Reed did an interview with him, which what a pairing that had to have been. You
Who is
know,
this you're talking about?
Michelangelo Antonioni, the director of La Ventura, Blow Up, La Notte. Daniel's favorite, Zabriskie Point. I'm just teasing you, Daniel.
he's my favorite director.
Oh, I know he is. I know he is. That's why I brought him up. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Point.
Zabriskie Point is not your favorite of his films, even though you defend it more than most people. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I want to make it clear that that was humor.
That's correct, but I do consider it among the few masterpieces of cinema. So among the 100 or so,
I saw
and,
it
and I will
once
defend
long
it.
ago.
Yeah, we should talk about it sometime.
I wouldn't piss on that film if it were on fire, but hey, yeah. I did try to rewatch it because I have a deep respect for Daniel, and I got as far as the scene where he's walking out and uh, somebody says to him, "Are you willing to die for the cause?" And he says, "Not out of boredom." And I was like, "Oh my god, I forgot just how bad the acting was in this." And I did the exact same thing. I was like, I'm not going to watch this because it's boring.
Well, if you watch it for the logic, that's there's no point getting into it right now. We've got a
Well,
big
or the acting.
discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. That's true. And this is UK cinema history, not American cinema history. We could do Blow Up in this room, but we
we
did
could.
blow up. But we did Blow Up over there. I was thinking after I do the All Saints Day special next week with Beckett and Man for All Seasons, of doing Lindsay Anderson's If next, which came out 2 years after Blow Up and was definitely inspired by Antonioni in several ways. And so I think that would be a conversation I might work rescheduling the room around having you here for Daniel, because that might be a film where we could have some fruitful comparisons of the Italian versus the uh, the British look at late 1960s London.
Okay, I might be able to do that. Might take some time though. There's a much there's a to me there's a big difference between doing a room on a film that I already know. It doesn't require a lot of preparation, or do versus doing a room on a film that I'm gonna have to
Like
see
I say, I
again.
would work around your schedule. It could be
Okay.
a month from now or way. Well, like we did with this. I mean, but
Yeah, I mean this one I already knew. This one I was ready for. I
right.
did. I rewrote my essay in preparation for this room, and I
Oh,
didn't rewatch it.
put a link to that in the chat because I do
Oh,
have
you do too.
I have the fives of people who listen to this on replay. Well, okay, I have 5 people who listen to this on replay, and also Morgan couldn't be here, and he's going to be listening on replay. And we all love Morgan here. He's just great.
Yes,
I love his voice. He's got the best voice on Clubhouse. He's just so calming, you know.
he and Luca both.
Yes, Luca, you have a beautiful accent as well. Yeah. I didn't mean to make it a contest.
Thank you. I had well, just a note about post-war cinema in the UK. I was reading some of Noel Coward's letters, and he had a terribly tough time after 1945 in doing any kind of, and he was doing mainly plays, but he had a really tough time in getting any kind of traction on his plays after 45 that had anything to do with the war. So he did In Which We Serve, which was definitely a film, but I think it was a play as well. And the runs were
No,
very
no, it
short.
wasn't.
Or it wasn't,
In
okay.
which we
But the
serve
runs were
wasn't.
very short on his plays that had to do with the war directly. And he said that people generally wanted light and gay, um, a lot of gaiety and lightness. And so he kind of moved towards that. And, the biggest post-war film, I guess, or probably done during the war, was Brief Encounter, which again wasn't about the war. But then I see films like Where I Know Where We're Going. Is that the name of it? Pressburger. I think it's called I Know Where We're Going.
Perfect example because that was a bomb.
Right,
I know where I'm
right.
going. Right.
I Know Where I'm Going. Yeah, which I think is a very interesting film actually, but not successful. So
It was too soon. It was
I guess
just too
people,
soon. It's a great film now.
yeah, yeah. But that's an interesting thing. So perhaps
Well, and
indirectly,
it is interesting that the post-war films had worn themselves out of the war for about 5 years because almost all the films that were made during the war were war films. And so, you can say there was a psychological thing with the audience, or you could just say, kind of like what's happening with superhero films now, what happened with westerns, what happened with pretty much every genre is, people got sick of them. And they needed a break, and they needed Terrence Rattigan and Noel Coward doing versions of their affairs, changing the boys to women, which is what we got for the next decade and a half, and until you had, of course, the angry young man movement, and then you had Tony Richardson came in with the supposedly more hetero kitchen soup dramas, because you
kitchen
no
sink.
longer
Yeah,
the kitchen soup, yeah, the kitchen sink.
sink. I think.
Did I say
Yeah,
soup? I said soup. Wow, it must be getting towards dinner time here. I must be hungry.
ready for your
No,
tea.
yeah, kitchen sink dramas. And you had your John Osborne, which was. It's interesting because we're talking about Michael Redgrave here, who was the siren of the Redgrave flock, of Vanessa Redgrave, Len Redgrave, and of course the Anderson girls, who were the daughters of Vanessa Redgrave and Tony Richardson. Until Tony Richardson left Vanessa Redgrave, who I considered one of the 3 most beautiful women in the world, for Jean Moreau, who I consider one of the other most beautiful women in the world.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that. That's a bit of hot gossip, a bit of banter there.
and the worst kept secret in the world about both Michael Redgrave and Tony Richardson, who eventually would die of AIDS, was that they were rampant bisexuals who, upon their deaths, had hundreds and hundreds of men testifying to the affairs they had with him, including, in Michael Redgrave's case, a man by the name of Noel Coward, who all during the war was carrying
Really?
on a relationship with him, and says he based Brief Encounter on his first meeting with Michael Redgrave and just changed Michael Redgrave to a
Did
woman.
he say that? Because Coward was famously
In
tight-lipped
his
about
letters,
his private life.
not in his letters. He didn't come out and say it.
Okay, yeah.
It was it was published in his letters. Yeah, yeah. So what took place? It is a very interesting thing that took place. And now I'm gonna have to put this into a perspective between the lesbian vampire films that we did, The Hunger, and last week's Vampire Lovers, and all the Almodovar films that we've done. I have been surrounded by queer cinema for the last month and a half. And so I'm kind of seeing these things everywhere. But as I was looking in this film, I constantly see this kind of homosexual subtext to almost all of the characters. Redgrave is literally in an abusive relationship with a male dummy, and he is playing, that as an abused partner almost all the way through that section of the film. The two men who are forced a woman to decide between them, the two golfers, have a closer relationship than anyone else in the film. And it, and I don't know if that's there on purpose, or again, I'm just seeing it because I have been constantly dealing with, Almodovar and and these vampires, because what is gayer than vampires? I can't tell you. But I'm just telling you what I saw while I was watching the film. And the casting of somebody who was as, what's the phrase I'm looking for, stereotypically queer as Redgrave was, can't have been an accident. They were going for something when they used him and had him perform that particular trope.
But
Yeah, I
just
wish I
yesterday, I
were.
finished.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Just yesterday, I finished rewriting my essay on the Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which
Oh,
is,
do tell. I
if
would
you
love
want
to
to
see
continue,
that.
yeah,
That's a queer classic. Yeah, that
I think that qualifies as queer. I think so.
that's definitely, well, trans.
I say that facetiously. It's of course very much.
Yeah,
Very
yeah. I get that now. I'm sorry, I'm a little dense. Rocky Horror Picture Show might be a little gay.
Well, what I find so compelling, and I wish I were a little more informed about, about queer cinema, or even suggestive cinema of queerness, is that I'm really quite interested in the suggested cinema of queerness. Before it was really out there, because I find the coded nature of it, speaking through indirect codes. Um, like I find that the Brief Encounter is a very kind of proto-queer film, because it's sort of a hidden connection that, even when you have to hide and do it in secret and run around, but yet it's real. It's realer than the surface relationship, maybe the heteronormative relationship you have. Um, So I'm really interested in kind of the coded nature. I mean, one of these days I would like to go back and
Well,
look at some of these films
this is
through
the
that
period.
lens.
This is definitely the period, Luca, um, of that.
Of course, yeah.
Terrence Rattigan actually made a career of using suppressed homosexuality as a metaphor for England, almost throughout all his plays. His film or the film, his play Ross about Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, basically says out loud, "Yes, I'm a homosexual, but I suppress it for the good of the country." He literally said, he literally has T.E. Lawrence say that, and but you know, um, and it's only, I would say, like 1957 that you actually have uh, uh, playwrights coming forth like Joe Orton, for instance, who are no longer having to clue at it and can and can openly have gay characters. So yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating element, but what is fascinating about it isn't that they had to hide it for social reasons, or for, in the United States we had the Hays Code, you had the rating system in Britain, or what have you. It was because they literally felt that by suppressing their homosexuality, they were creating a much needed art form, because it was supposed to be kind of the best of both worlds. You get a gay man's world of gay man's view of the straight world. And so when you're watching, say, a Noel Coward play, but if you read Laurence Olivier's autobiography, one of the things he complained about is that you couldn't get a job in the theater at that time in England unless you were actively in a homosexual relationship with one of the three or four playwrights who were still being able to get their plays published. So it, you really had, from 1945 on to about 1957. I don't.
Well, I think in general, suppression, psychological suppression of your sexuality or of many things, leads to a generativity in other areas. So I'm about a third of the way through Iris Murdoch's novel called The Bell, and it's about a kind of hidden religious community that springs up because of a repressed homosexual's um, shame and guilt, and he decides to, in a way, kind of repent by creating this. It's a kind of mysterious community, and I'm a third of the way through, but repression leads to generativity in other areas. Not always good generativity, sometimes quite maladaptive, but also can be artistic.
Which
I think a
Iris
lot of films
Murdoch?
have that. Oh, it's called The Bell,
Oh,
1958.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good novel.
I think you're absolutely right. You can look at the history of cinema and find so much uh, fertility and creativity during regimes of censorship, like the Nazi censorship of French film in the World War II, or the Iranian regime's censorship. There's a lot of great films came out of that. The Hays Code, for example. So,
Well, Buñuel complained in the 1970s that he didn't have anything that he could scandalize anymore, and that's why he had to make those French comedies, because uh, he because without having a Franco figure in Spain, or the Mexican government breathing down his neck. He had nothing that he could create a scandal around.
Right. It's Buñuel all over.
Yeah, I love him. Did you ever read My Last Breath, his autobiography?
No.
I read that. Yeah,
He's
it's really
great.
good.
He is so hilarious all the way through that book.
I met his grandson once at Northwestern University.
Wow.
Is that
Where's
Jose?
that
Yeah.
now?
Jose Buñuel?
Diego.
Oh,
Diego
I
Buñuel.
don't know Diego. I know Jose Buñuel from documentaries.
Yeah. He told me one story about how Buñuel would sit at the head of the family table, the big patriarch, and he would address the children very sternly about their table manners. And you know that you hold the knife in this hand, the fork in this hand, and always put your napkin here and do this and this. And whatever you do, never, ever, ever do this. And then he would take his plate and lick it. And the kids just burst out laughing. All their parents, the middle generations, like looking at each other. But the kids loved it.
He has this great line in My Last Breath, or My Last Sigh. I think it might be Sigh. You
Yeah,
too
mon
much
dernier
mosquito.
souffle.
Yeah, My Last Sigh, where he says, "I can remember the day and the date of the moment all sexual desire left my body, and it was the greatest day of my life. I could finally focus on other things that were meaningful and important." And I never forgot that line.
Strange. He
He
also
and
said,
Alfred Hitchcock were born on the exact same day
"Oh,
in
I think I used to know that."
1901. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, I'm gonna wrap this room up because we've gone on longer than the movie again. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Herbert. Again, if you want to join us next week, we'll be doing Beckett versus A Man for All Seasons. We're going to start, I guess, at 3 o'clock next week instead of 2:30.
Okay, thanks. What happened
Yeah.
to understanding movies?
We
It's
had
still
an
there.
episode yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday, at noon?
1 o'clock
1 o'clock.
Eastern time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to keep those in mind. Thank you.
Next Saturday is The Big Sleep.
Okay.
You're
Haven't
still
seen
on
that.
the noir.
Humphrey Bogart.
You're on the noir
Yeah.
kick.
They're still doing noirs. It wasn't my
Only for
idea to do.
only for another 2 years.
Oh my gosh. We did 7 of those AI films, which I wasn't entirely enthusiastic about. But we're reaching that with the noirs now. But it looks like it might go even longer because there's so many suggestions floating out there.
Well, my favorite noir, if you want to do it, is The Last Seduction with Linda Fiorentini, John Dahl. But I won't be there for reasons you and I both know. But that's a
Sure.
really great film.
It's a
I've
Really
never
enjoyed
even
that
seen
one.
that.
it's a good
Oh,
film.
Oh, you haven't seen The Last
It's a
Seduction?
good film. I don't
no.
know.
Delicious.
I don't
Evil.
know. I haven't seen it in so many years that I don't know enough about it off the top of my head that it's definitely worth a rewatch. So I may rewatch it anyway. Yeah, and just have a discussion of it with Luca one day.
It's so enjoyable, and it's so arch. It's a very arch film. Um, and Daniel, just in case we close right now, I'll reach out to you on the established back channels,
Okay.
just to say
Good.
hi. Okay.
Good. Yeah. It was good to be with you all. And
Yeah, well, thank you for coming, Daniel. It is too bad that Yazzie had real life issues, but hey, she'll probably be here next week. And she's done such a good job so far. I can't judge, but we'll definitely see you all again. I will see you, Daniel, for sure next week for the big sleep. And Luca, always good. Herbert,
Such a pleasure.
always love having you here, and have a great one.
And what were the two films for next week for Sunday?
1964's Beckett,
Right.
starring
Okay.
and 1966, A Man for All Seasons.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Both of them are streaming free on things all around the internet. So I do try and pick films that people don't have to pay for.
Thank you, Eric. This was a lot of fun. And thank you,
Well,
Daniel and Herbert.
you made it more fun, and yeah, I looking forward to the next one. Have a great one.
Same to you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.